What if I told you that for nearly a century, Egypt, the land of the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx, and one of the most powerful civilizations of the ancient world, was ruled not by Egyptians, but by African kings from the south? Kings whose names were later chiseled away from monuments, whose achievements were forgotten for millennia, whose very existence challenged everything we thought we knew about ancient Africa. These weren't brutal conquerors who destroyed Egypt. Archaeological evidence suggests they were pharaohs who revitalized it. They were the Nubian pharaohs of the 25th Dynasty, rulers of the Kingdom of Kush, and their story represents one of the most remarkable chapters in ancient African history. But here's what will surprise you. They didn't just rule Egypt. They may have understood Egyptian tradition better than many native Egyptian rulers of their time. Picture the Nile River flowing northward through the heart of Africa. Most people know about the Egypt it nourishes, the land of pharaohs and pyramids, but fewer know about the kingdoms that flourish beyond the first cataract, in the land south of Aswan, where the river carved through granite cliffs and golden deserts. This was Nubia, or as scholars now prefer to call it, the Kingdom of Kush. The ancient Egyptians called it Ta Sidi, the land of the bow, named for the skilled archers whose military prowess was renowned throughout the ancient world. But the Egyptians had another name for this region, Nub, the land of gold. Archaeological evidence shows that complex societies existed in this region for millennia. At Kerma, one of Africa's earliest urban centers, people were building sophisticated settlements, creating fine pottery and working metals as early as 2500 BCE. Their burial practices and material culture reveal a civilization that was both distinctly African and remarkably advanced. The relationship between Egypt and Kush was never simple. For centuries, these were neighboring civilizations that traded, intermarried, fought, and influenced each other. Nubian princes served in Egyptian armies. Egyptian goods filled Nubian tombs. Cultural exchange flowed both directions along the Nile. Around 1500 BCE, during Egypt's New Kingdom period, this balance shifted dramatically. Egypt, seeking to control Nubian gold mines and trade routes, conquered much of Kush and established it as a colonial territory. For the next 4 centuries, Nubian wealth flowed north to fund Egyptian monuments and military campaigns. But conquest is never total. In the temples and settlements of Kush, local traditions persisted alongside Egyptian customs. Nubian nobles learned to read Egyptian hieroglyphs while maintaining their own languages. They adopted Egyptian religious practices while preserving their own beliefs. Most importantly, they studied Egyptian concepts of kingship and divine rule. By 1100 BCE, Egypt's new kingdom was fragmenting. Internal rebellions, foreign invasions, and economic troubles weakened Egyptian control over its southern territories. Around 1070 BCE, Egyptian authority in Kush effectively collapsed, and local rulers began to reassert their independence. What happened next would astonish the ancient world. The descendants of Egypt's former subjects didn't simply rebuild their own kingdom. They began to position themselves as the legitimate heirs to pharaonic tradition itself. But what gave these African rulers the audacity to claim Egyptian legitimacy? What made them believe they could succeed where so many others had failed? The answer lies in a religious and political revolution centered around a sacred mountain. In the shadow of Jebel Barkal, a sandstone mountain that the Kushites considered sacred, a new dynasty was taking shape. Around 760 BCE, a ruler named Piye came to power in the city of Napata, and he would fundamentally change the relationship between Kush and Egypt. Archaeological evidence suggests that Piye was no ordinary king. The victory stela discovered at Jebel Barkal, one of the most detailed historical records from ancient Africa, reveals a ruler who combined military skill with deep religious conviction and political sophistication. The Egypt that Piye observed around 740 BCE was a fractured land. The unified kingdom of the pharaohs had splintered into competing dynasties. Libyan rulers controlled much of the north, while local strongmen governed individual cities and regions. This political chaos horrified Piye, who saw himself as a guardian of traditional Egyptian values. What made Piye's claim to legitimacy credible was his genuine mastery of Egyptian culture and religion. Unlike foreign conquerors who imposed their own traditions, Piye demonstrated profound knowledge of Egyptian religious practices, artistic conventions, and administrative systems. His inscriptions show fluent use of traditional Egyptian royal titles and religious formulas. When Piye finally launched his campaign around 744 BCE, his approach was as much diplomatic as military. Rather than simply invading, he presented himself as Egypt's rightful pharaoh, come to restore Ma'at, the Egyptian principle of cosmic order and justice, to a land corrupted by weak and illegitimate rulers. The campaign, recorded in detail on Piye's victory stela, reveals a sophisticated strategy. City after city submitted to his authority, often without a fight. Local rulers who acknowledged his legitimacy were confirmed in their positions. Those who resisted faced the military might of Kushite armies, renowned for their archery skills and disciplined tactics. By approximately 728 BCE, Piye controlled Egypt from Nubia to the Mediterranean. He had accomplished something unprecedented. An African ruler had conquered and unified Egypt using a combination of military force and religious legitimacy that even Egyptians found convincing. But here's what makes Piye's story truly remarkable. Having achieved this incredible victory, having proven his divine right to rule Egypt, he made a decision that puzzled his contemporaries and continues to intrigue historians today. He returned home to Nubia. Rather than establishing permanent residence in Memphis or Thebes, Piye governed Egypt from Napata through appointed officials while maintaining his primary base in Kush. This wasn't abandonment. It was a revolutionary model of rule that would define the 25th Dynasty. But Piye's innovative approach to governing two kingdoms would soon face its greatest test. New threats were emerging from the north and east, forces that would either destroy the Kushite experiment or forge it into something even more remarkable. If you're finding this story as fascinating as I am, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next in the saga of the Kushite pharaohs will show you just how sophisticated ancient African political systems could be. Piye's decision to rule Egypt from Nubia wasn't retreat, it was political genius. He had created something unprecedented in the ancient world, a bicultural kingdom that drew legitimacy from both Egyptian tradition and Kushite innovation. Archaeological evidence from both Egypt and Nubia during this period reveals remarkable developments. In Egypt, neglected temples were restored using traditional techniques and artistic styles. The quality of craftsmanship, which had declined during the periods of political fragmentation, suddenly improved dramatically under Kushite patronage. But it was in Nubia that the most innovative developments occurred. At Nuri and other royal cemeteries, Piye and his successors built pyramids, the first constructed in the Nile Valley for over 500 years. These weren't simple copies of Egyptian monuments, but showed distinctly Kushite characteristics: steeper angles, underground burial chambers, and decorative elements that reflected local artistic traditions. The religious implications were revolutionary. Jebel Barkal, which the Kushites identified as the mythical birthplace of the god Amun, became a pilgrimage site for priests from throughout the Nile Valley. Egyptian religious authorities traveled south to consult oracles and participate in ceremonies that validated the divine authority of Kushite pharaohs. This remarkable synthesis faced its first major test during the reign of Piye's successor, Shabaka, approximately 721–707 BCE. Unlike his predecessor, Shabaka chose to reside primarily in Egypt, establishing a more conventional pharaonic court while maintaining strong connections to Nubia. Under Shabaka's rule, the 25th Dynasty faced growing pressure from the Assyrian Empire, which was expanding westward and had already conquered much of the Levant. Egyptian cities and vassal states began requesting Kushite military support against Assyrian invasions. But the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity would come during the reign of Taharqa, who ascended to the throne around 690 BCE. Taharqa would prove to be perhaps the most capable ruler of the entire dynasty, a pharaoh whose achievements would rival those of the most celebrated kings in Egyptian history. Under Taharqa's leadership, the 25th Dynasty would reach its peak, defending Egypt against the world's greatest military power, while simultaneously overseeing a cultural and architectural renaissance that influenced both Egyptian and Nubian civilization for centuries to come. But Taharqa's rise to power came at a moment of extreme crisis, when the very survival of independent Egypt hung in the balance. When Taharqa became pharaoh around 690 BCE, he inherited an empire under siege. The Assyrian war machine, led by kings like Sennacherib and later Esarhaddon, represented the most advanced military technology of the ancient world. Their iron weapons, siege engines, and professional armies had conquered kingdoms from Mesopotamia to the Levant. But Taharqa was uniquely prepared for this challenge. Archaeological evidence suggests he had spent years studying Assyrian military tactics and had implemented significant reforms in Kushite armies. His forces combined traditional Nubian archery skills with new weapons technologies and innovative battlefield strategies. What made Taharqa different from his predecessors was his understanding that defeating the Assyrians required more than military might. It required a comprehensive strategy that combined diplomacy, economics, and cultural influence with tactical innovation. Taharqa established what may have been the ancient world's most sophisticated intelligence network. Kushite agents operated throughout the Assyrian Empire, providing detailed information about military movements, political divisions, and economic weaknesses. This intelligence allowed Taharqa to coordinate his strategies with rebellions and resistance movements throughout the region. The scope of this network was remarkable. Archaeological evidence from sites across the Middle East reveals Kushite diplomatic correspondence with kingdoms in modern-day Turkey, Iran, and the Arabian Peninsula. Taharqa wasn't just defending Egypt, he was organizing a coalition of Assyrian enemies that stretched across 3 continents. The confrontation came to a head around 701 BCE, when Assyrian forces under Sennacherib besieged Jerusalem. According to biblical accounts confirmed by Assyrian records, Taharqa marched north with a substantial army to support King Hezekiah of Judah. What happened next remains debated by historians, but the outcome was clear. Sennacherib's campaign failed catastrophically. Whether due to disease, military defeat, or strategic withdrawal in the face of multiple threats, the Assyrians retreated, and Sennacherib was later assassinated by his own sons in Nineveh. The victory over Sennacherib established Taharqa as one of the great military leaders of the ancient world, but he understood that military success alone wouldn't secure long-term peace. The Assyrians would return, and when they did, they would come with overwhelming force. Taharqa's response was to transform Egypt into something it had never been before, the center of a cultural and economic empire that would be too valuable to destroy and too well connected to conquer. With the immediate Assyrian threat neutralized, Taharqa launched the most ambitious construction program seen in Egypt for centuries. At Karnak, he added massive colonnades and sacred structures that rivaled the greatest achievements of previous dynasties. His name appears on monuments from the Nile Delta to the Fourth Cataract. But these weren't simply monuments to royal ego. Each construction project served multiple purposes. They provided employment for Egyptian craftsmen, demonstrated Kushite commitment to Egyptian traditions, and created physical symbols of the dynasty's legitimacy that would endure long after political circumstances changed. The artistic achievements of Taharqa's reign reveal the sophistication of Kushite cultural synthesis. Statues from this period show masterful execution of traditional Egyptian artistic conventions, but with subtle modifications that reflect African aesthetic traditions. The facial features are more varied, the body proportions slightly different, the clothing and jewelry incorporating elements that clearly derive from Kushite culture. Most remarkably, the hieroglyphic inscriptions from this period represent some of the most grammatically perfect Egyptian texts ever created. After centuries of linguistic change and foreign influence, the Kushites had restored classical Egyptian to a level of purity that impressed even Egyptian scribes. Taharqa also revolutionized Egypt's economy. Under his rule, trade networks expanded dramatically, connecting Egypt not just with traditional Mediterranean partners, but with kingdoms throughout sub-Saharan Africa. Gold, ivory, exotic animals, and manufactured goods flowed north through Kushite-controlled territories, while Egyptian products and technologies moved south into previously unexplored markets. The economic impact was transformative. Egyptian cities that had stagnated under previous rulers suddenly experienced unprecedented prosperity. Craftsmen who had struggled to find work during the periods of political fragmentation found themselves overwhelmed with commissions. International merchants who had avoided Egypt during its chaotic periods returned in large numbers. Perhaps most significantly, Taharqa established what may have been the ancient world's first systematic program of cultural preservation and education. Recognizing that Egypt's political instability had resulted in the loss of many traditional practices, he commissioned scholars to collect, record, and preserve Egyptian religious texts, historical records, and technical knowledge. The results of this program can be seen in the numerous papyri, stone inscriptions, and artistic works that survive from his reign. Many ancient Egyptian texts that we know today exist only because Kushite scribes created copies during Taharqa's cultural revival. Taharqa's diplomatic achievements were equally impressive. Under his leadership, Egypt became the leader of what might be called the ancient world's first Pan-African alliance. Kingdoms from Libya to Ethiopia, from the Atlantic coast to the Red Sea, coordinated their policies with Kushite Egypt and provided mutual support against common threats. This alliance wasn't based solely on military cooperation. Archaeological evidence suggests extensive cultural and technological exchanges between these kingdoms. Architectural techniques developed in Nubia appeared in Ethiopian temples. Artistic styles created in Egypt influenced sculpture throughout the Western Sudan. Agricultural innovations pioneered in one region quickly spread to others. But Taharqa's greatest challenge was yet to come. The Assyrians, humiliated by their defeat in the Levant, were rebuilding their forces and preparing for a final, decisive invasion of Egypt. This time, they would come with overwhelming force, led by a new king who had learned from Sennacherib's mistakes. Esarhaddon, who had seized the Assyrian throne after his father's assassination, understood that conquering Egypt would require more than military superiority. He spent years building alliances with Egyptian nobles who resented Kushite rule, promising them power and wealth in exchange for their support. The intelligence reports reaching Taharqa painted a grim picture. The coming Assyrian invasion would be the largest military operation in ancient Middle Eastern history. Multiple armies would attack from different directions. Naval forces would prevent escape routes along the Mediterranean. Most dangerously, Egyptian collaborators were prepared to open city gates and provide intelligence to the invaders. Taharqa faced an impossible choice. He could fight a hopeless war that would devastate Egypt, or he could attempt a strategic withdrawal that might preserve both his dynasty and Egyptian civilization for future generations. The decision he made would determine whether he would be remembered as the last great pharaoh of Egypt or as the founder of a new model of African civilization that would endure for over 1,000 years. What happened next would shock the ancient world and demonstrate that sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting, but from knowing when to transform defeat into opportunity. The Assyrian invasion of 671 BCE came with a force that Egypt had never seen. Esarhaddon's armies attacked from multiple directions with coordination that demonstrated years of careful planning. Unlike previous Assyrian campaigns, this one had the support of significant Egyptian collaborators who provided intelligence, supplies, and safe passage through supposedly defended territories. The war that followed revealed both the strengths and limitations of Kushite military power. Taharqa's forces fought brilliantly in individual battles, but they were systematically outmaneuvered by enemies who knew the terrain and had local support. City after city fell to the Assyrian advance, not because of military defeat, but because local authorities opened their gates to the invaders. At Memphis, Taharqa made his last stand. The battle for Egypt's ancient capital lasted for weeks and demonstrated the tactical skill that had made the Kushites such formidable warriors. Archaeological evidence from the site suggests that the fighting was intense and that both sides suffered heavy casualties. But military skill alone couldn't overcome the fundamental strategic reality. Taharqa was fighting not just against the Assyrian army, but against significant portions of the Egyptian population who had decided that foreign rule was preferable to African rule. Faced with this impossible situation, Taharqa made perhaps the most difficult decision of his reign. Rather than see Egypt destroyed in a hopeless war, rather than allow the Assyrians to devastate the cultural treasures his dynasty had worked so hard to preserve, he ordered a strategic withdrawal to Nubia. This wasn't surrender, it was transformation. Taharqa understood that the Kushite experiment in Egypt had achieved its primary goals. Egyptian traditions had been preserved and revitalized. Trade networks had been established that would benefit both kingdoms for centuries, and most importantly, the knowledge and skills necessary to maintain high civilization had been transferred to Africa. The withdrawal itself was a masterpiece of military organization. Rather than abandoning their Egyptian allies to Assyrian revenge, the Kushites organized a careful evacuation that allowed thousands of Egyptian craftsmen, priests, and scholars to relocate to Nubia. The great libraries and temple archives that had been restored during the Kushite period were packed and transported south. Most remarkably, archaeological evidence suggests that many of the skilled workers who had participated in Taharqa's construction projects chose to follow their royal patrons into exile rather than remain under Assyrian rule. This voluntary migration represented one of the largest transfers of technical knowledge in ancient history. What Taharqa accomplished during this retreat was remarkable. He transformed a military defeat into a cultural victory. The Egypt that the Assyrians conquered was a shell of its former self. The best scholars had departed, the most skilled craftsmen had relocated, and much of the accumulated wealth had been moved beyond Assyrian reach. Meanwhile, in Nubia, the former rulers of Egypt were preparing to create something unprecedented, an African kingdom that would preserve and develop the best aspects of pharaonic civilization while remaining forever free from foreign control. The first priority was establishing a new capital. While Napata remained important as a religious center, the practical requirements of governing and expanding kingdom demanded a more centrally located administrative center. The site chosen was Meroe, strategically positioned between the Blue and White Niles and connected to trade routes that extended deep into Africa. The construction of Meroe revealed the extent to which Kushite civilization had evolved beyond simple imitation of Egyptian models. The city's layout incorporated urban planning concepts that were more advanced than anything seen in Egypt, with sophisticated water management systems, residential districts organized by profession and social status, and industrial areas that were carefully separated from living spaces. Perhaps most significantly, Meroe became the center of iron production on a scale that was unprecedented in Africa. The city's foundries and workshops produced not just weapons and tools for local use, but manufactured goods for export throughout the continent. Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of steel production techniques that were more advanced than those used in most other contemporary civilizations. The economic implications were transformative. Meroe's position between the Nile system and the overland routes to the Red Sea made it the natural center for trade between the Mediterranean world and sub-Saharan Africa. Goods that had previously been obtained through Egyptian intermediaries now flowed directly through Kushite-controlled territories. This economic independence allowed the Kushite kingdom to develop relationships with other civilizations as an equal rather than a subordinate. Diplomatic correspondence from this period shows negotiations with Rome, Byzantium, and kingdoms in India and China that treated Kushite rulers as sovereign monarchs of a major power. The cultural achievements of this period were equally remarkable. The withdrawal from Egypt had brought together scholars, artists, and craftsmen from both kingdoms, creating a unique synthesis of traditions that was neither purely Egyptian nor purely Kushite. but something entirely new. The development of Meroitic script during this period represents one of the most significant intellectual achievements in African history. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which required years of study to master, Meroitic writing was alphabetic and relatively simple to learn. This democratization of literacy had profound social implications, allowing for much wider participation in government, commerce, and religious activities. Religiously, the Kushite kingdom developed into something unique in the ancient world, a civilization that successfully maintained multiple religious traditions simultaneously. Egyptian gods continued to be worshipped alongside traditional Kushite deities, while influences from other African spiritual traditions were gradually incorporated into the religious synthesis. The great temple complex at Jebel Barkal became a pilgrimage destination for people from throughout Africa and beyond. Archaeological evidence suggests that visitors came from as far away as Ethiopia, Chad, and the Atlantic coast to participate in religious ceremonies and study at what had become one of the continent's major centers of learning. What Taharqa and his successors had accomplished was extraordinary. They had transformed political defeat into cultural triumph, military retreat into technological advancement, and foreign conquest into African Renaissance. The kingdom they created would endure for over 1,000 years, long after the Assyrian Empire had fallen and Egypt itself had become a province of successive foreign empires. But perhaps most remarkably, they had demonstrated something that would inspire African civilizations for centuries to come, that political independence and cultural sophistication were not only compatible, but mutually reinforcing. The story of what happened next, how this African kingdom developed into one of the ancient world's great civilizations, challenges everything we think we know about post-Pharaonic Africa. The withdrawal from Egypt could have marked the end of Kushite greatness. Instead, it became the beginning of a new chapter that would last for nearly 1,000 years and leave an indelible mark on African civilization. Around 600 BCE, the Kushite rulers established their new capital at Meroe, strategically located between the Blue and White Niles in what is now Sudan. This location provided access to trade routes extending deep into Africa while remaining safely beyond the reach of Mediterranean powers. Archaeological excavations at Meroe have revealed evidence of sophisticated ironworking industries. While claims of an industrial revolution may be overstated, the scale of metal production was remarkable for its time. Furnace remains suggest continuous iron and steel production over many centuries, supporting both local needs and long-distance trade. Perhaps most significantly, the Kushite kingdom developed its own written script, Meroitic, which remained in use for over 600 years. While not yet fully deciphered, surviving inscriptions demonstrate a literate society that maintained its own historical records, religious texts, and administrative documents. The rulers of Meroe, including several powerful queens known as Kandaks, Candaces, maintained diplomatic relations with Rome, Byzantium, and other major powers as equals. One Kandak, Amenarenas, actually fought a successful war against Augustus Caesar's Rome, securing favorable treaty terms that lasted for centuries. Meroe became the center of trade networks that connected the Mediterranean world with sub-Saharan Africa. Archaeological evidence shows goods from as far as India and China reaching Kushite sites, while African products, ivory, gold, exotic animals, and manufactured goods flowed north and east. The art and architecture of the Meroitic period reveal a sophisticated fusion of influences. Traditional Egyptian motifs appeared alongside distinctly African artistic elements, Hellenistic influences from contact with the Greek world, and indigenous Kushite traditions that had evolved over centuries. Religiously, the Kushites maintained their role as guardians of Amun, while incorporating other deities and practices. The temples at Jebel Barkal continued to function as major pilgrimage sites, attracting visitors from throughout the Nile Valley and beyond. However, by the 4th century CE, the Kushite kingdom faced new challenges. Climate change made agriculture more difficult. The rise of Aksum in Ethiopia disrupted traditional trade routes. Most significantly, the conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity created religious tensions with the traditional Egyptian gods still worshipped in Meroe. Around 350 CE, the last Meroitic ruler died, and the kingdom gradually fragmented into smaller Christian and later Islamic states. The great experiment of Kushite civilization had lasted over 1,400 years, longer than most of the world's great empires. But the end of political unity didn't mean the end of Kushite influence. The technologies, artistic traditions, and political concepts developed during the Meroitic period spread throughout sub-Saharan Africa, influencing kingdoms and societies across the continent. What's most remarkable is that for nearly 2,000 years, this entire civilization was almost completely forgotten by the outside world. How did such a remarkable achievement disappear from historical memory? The answer reveals as much about the politics of historical scholarship as it does about ancient Africa. For over 2 millennia, the story of the Kushite pharaohs remained buried, not just beneath the sands of Sudan, but beneath layers of historical assumption and scholarly bias that made their achievements almost invisible to modern researchers. The process of forgetting began even during ancient times. When Assyrian and later Persian, Greek, and Roman conquerors controlled Egypt, they had little interest in celebrating the achievements of African rulers. Egyptian historical records from later periods often minimized or ignored the 25th Dynasty entirely. During the colonial period in the early days of modern Egyptology, European scholars working within the intellectual frameworks of their time found it difficult to accept evidence of sophisticated African civilizations. Even when archaeological evidence was undeniable, it was often misinterpreted or attributed to external influences. The Great Pyramids of Nuri were dismissed as crude imitations of Egyptian monuments, despite showing sophisticated engineering adapted to local conditions. Meroitic ironworking was attributed to foreign craftsmen rather than indigenous innovation. The historical records describing African pharaohs were explained away as propaganda or later fabrications. This scholarly bias had real consequences. Archaeological funding for Sudanese sites remained limited compared to Egyptian excavations. Museum collections focused on Egyptian artifacts, while Kushite materials were relegated to storage. University curricula rarely mentioned the 25th Dynasty, and popular histories of ancient Egypt treated it as a minor footnote. The rediscovery began slowly in the early 20th century, as archaeologists like George Reisner began systematic work in Sudan. However, even Reisner, despite his groundbreaking discoveries, interpreted his findings through racial assumptions that minimized Kushite achievements. The real breakthrough came in the 1960s and later, with the work of archaeologists like Timothy Kendall, Charles Bonney, and teams from multiple universities. Their excavations revealed not just isolated artifacts, but complete urban complexes that demonstrated the sophistication of Kushite civilization. At Kerma, Swiss archaeologists uncovered evidence of urban planning and monumental architecture that predated similar Egyptian developments. At Jebel Barkal, American teams found temple complexes that rivaled anything in Egypt. At various Kushite sites, researchers discovered evidence of metallurgy, agriculture, and trade that painted a picture of a remarkably advanced African civilization. Perhaps most importantly, they found Piye's victory stela and other contemporary inscriptions that provided detailed, contemporary accounts of Kushite rule over Egypt. These weren't later mythological accounts. They were historical records created by the pharaohs themselves. The implications were profound. Here was proof that African rulers hadn't simply conquered Egypt through military force, but had governed it according to traditional Egyptian principles while maintaining their own cultural identity. The art, architecture, and administrative systems they created represented genuine cultural synthesis rather than mere imitation. But the rediscovery also raised uncomfortable questions about how historical narratives are constructed. If such a remarkable civilization could be forgotten for 2 millennia, What other achievements had been overlooked? How many other cultures had been misunderstood or marginalized by scholars working with limited perspectives? Today, ongoing archaeological work continues to reveal new aspects of Kushite civilization, but much remains threatened by political instability, economic development, and climate change. The race to understand and preserve this heritage continues. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery about the Kushites is how their influence extended far beyond their own time and place, shaping African civilizations in ways that are only now being fully understood. The story of the Kushite pharaohs might seem like ancient history, but their influence continues to resonate throughout Africa and the world in ways that are both profound and surprising. Across contemporary Africa, the rediscovery of Kushite achievements has sparked renewed interest in ancient African civilizations. From Sudan to South Africa, from Ghana to Ethiopia, educators, artists, and intellectuals are drawing inspiration from this example of African political and cultural sophistication. In schools throughout Africa and the diaspora, the story of Piye, Taharqa, and their successors is being taught as part of curricula that emphasize African contributions to world civilization. Students who might previously have learned primarily about European and Middle Eastern achievements now study African kings who ruled one of the ancient world's greatest empires. The scholarly impact has been equally significant. Universities worldwide have established or expanded African studies programs. Museums are re-examining their collections and creating new exhibits that highlight African achievements. Archaeological techniques developed for studying Kushite sites are being applied to other ancient African civilizations. Modern archaeological methods, satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, advanced dating techniques continue to reveal new aspects of Kushite civilization. Recent discoveries suggest that their influence extended far deeper into Africa than previously recognized, with trade goods and cultural influences reaching kingdoms in modern-day Chad, Central African Republic, and beyond. Isotope analysis of human remains from Kushite sites reveals complex patterns of migration and cultural exchange throughout the ancient world. DNA studies suggest extensive intermarriage between Kushite and Egyptian royal families, challenging simple narratives of foreign conquest and occupation. But perhaps the most important lesson from the Kushites concerns the nature of cultural interaction and synthesis. Their success wasn't based on rejecting Egyptian traditions or imposing purely Kushite customs, but on creating new forms that honored both heritages while serving contemporary needs. In our increasingly interconnected world, this model of respectful cultural synthesis offers valuable insights. The Kushites demonstrated that it's possible to maintain distinctive cultural identity while participating fully in broader civilizational networks. Unfortunately, much of the physical heritage of Kushite civilization remains threatened. Political instability in Sudan has limited archaeological work. Economic development projects, including dam construction, have flooded important sites. Climate change threatens to destroy artifacts and structures that have survived for millennia. International efforts to preserve and study Kushite heritage face significant challenges, but they continue. UNESCO World Heritage designation has helped protect some sites. Digital archaeology projects are creating detailed records of threatened monuments. Collaborative research between international scholars and local communities offers hope for preserving this remarkable heritage. What gives the story of the Kushites its enduring power isn't just their ancient achievements, but what they represent about human potential. They demonstrated that greatness can emerge from any part of the world, that political boundaries need not limit cultural exchange, and that apparent defeat can be transformed into lasting influence. Their pyramids still stand in the Sudanese desert. Their artistic traditions still influence contemporary African art. Their example of successful cultural synthesis still offers lessons for our globalized world. Most importantly, their story continues to inspire people who recognize that history belongs to all humanity. The Kushites weren't just rulers of ancient kingdoms. They were pioneers of approaches to leadership, cultural exchange, and civilizational development that remain relevant today. Their legacy reminds us that the most meaningful achievements often come not from control but from synthesis, not from destruction but from creative adaptation. In rediscovering the Kushites, we don't just recover a lost chapter of African history, we gain new perspectives on what human civilization can achieve when different cultures meet with mutual respect and creative ambition. So there you have it, the remarkable story of the Kingdom of Kush and the Nubian pharaohs who ruled Egypt during one of its most crucial periods. From Piye's brilliant conquest to Taharka's cultural achievements, from their innovative approach to governing multiple kingdoms to their lasting influence on African civilization, this is a story that deserves to be widely known. What strikes me most about this story is how it challenges our assumptions about the ancient world. For too long, historical narratives have emphasized the achievements of certain regions while overlooking the contributions of others. The Kushites remind us that sophistication, innovation, and political genius emerged from all parts of the ancient world. Their story also demonstrates the importance of approaching history with open minds and rigorous methodology. The fact that such remarkable achievements could be overlooked for so long should make us ask, what other stories have been forgotten? What other civilizations await rediscovery? If this story has fascinated you as much as it has fascinated me, I want to ask you to do something. Hit that like button to show that you believe these forgotten chapters of history deserve attention. Leave a comment telling me what aspect of Kushite civilization surprised you most, their military achievements, their cultural synthesis, their technological innovations, or their lasting influence. And if you want to discover more incredible stories from history, stories of forgotten civilizations, remarkable leaders, and the complex interactions between different cultures, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because human history is full of amazing achievements that have been overlooked, misunderstood, or deliberately ignored. The Kushite pharaohs remind us that every culture has contributed to the rich heritage of human civilization. Their story isn't just African history or ancient history, it's human history, and it belongs to all of us. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of history's most remarkable civilizations. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and remember, the most amazing stories are often the ones that have been waiting to be rediscovered.